Hi there, and welcome to an extra long edition of Cogheart, because I know that you've not had any of the readings this week, so we're going to dive into chapter 15 and see how far we can get. For the rest of the morning they followed the river southwards from the old mill. As the day warmed, shards of ice broke apart and melted into the free-flowing water. Soon the crunch of the snow under their feet became a soft slush, and rays of dappled sunlight drifted through the bare branches above. Otherwise, things were ominously quiet. Robert heard no sign of their pursuers, nor saw any evidence of them. They took turns carrying the box, bundled in its damp blanket. It wasn't particularly heavy, but it gnawed at Robert's mind, along with the loss of his da and all their other troubles. He worried they wouldn't find evidence of Lily's papa in the wreckage of the airship, or worse still, that they would. Another body would be too much to take at this point, and he could not help but think, after everything they'd been through, that the crash site was not the safest place to be heading. Late in the afternoon, Malcolm's ears pricked up, and he stopped further up the track. "This is it!" he called, pointing with his nose through the trees. Robert and Lily stepped through a gap in the foliage into a blackened clearing, eerily dead of sound. To one side, smashed into the trunk of an old oak, they saw the dented shape of Dragonfly's escaped pod. 30 feet away, further fragments of the ship lay scattered on the ground, as if an explosion had strewn them across the landscape. "Oh, Papa," Lily whispered. Robert tried to take her hand, but she flinched and pulled away, running through the melting drifts towards the clusters of burned metal. When he caught up with her, she was searching through the fragments for any sign of her father. "Lily, stop," Malcolm barked. "There's no one here, and if there was, they left days ago." Lily shook her head. "There must be something, some clue to what became of Papa after the silver airship locked together with Dragonfly." Robert shifted the bundle across his back. "Perhaps the flight recorder," he said. "All airships have them." "What does it look like?" she asked. "It's a grooved silver cylinder covered in markings, like the metal roller of a music box. It records sound. It will have recorded the last few minutes on the ship. After the pod ejects, it kicks in automatically, so it would tell us what happened after Malkin's escape, before the crash. If it's here, it will be somewhere in the cockpit wreckage." Lily bent low over the remains of the pilot's chair, which lay humpbacked on the ground. Beside it, twisted metal tubes exploded from the cracked front panel of a control console. She pulled the panel away and focused on the tangle of wires. "It's meant to look as if it was an accident," she said. "Just like with Mama, or your da, Robert. They want people to think he crashed. But that's not the case. We know they destroyed the ship for whatever's in this stupid box." Her voice, loud with rage, echoed around the clearing. "This isn't a safe place for us to be," Robert said. "Roach and Mould might guess we'd come here. I don't think we should stop too long." Lily ignored him and rooted through the rest of the wreckage. "I found it!" she shouted, pulling a silver cylinder from within the interior casing of another mangled console box. "This'll tell us what happened to Papa." Robert furrowed his brow. "It's no good yet. We've nothing to play it on." "We'll find something when we get to London. Listen, we just need to..." Her breath caught. There was a crunch of feet across the snow. "Hush," Malcolm snapped. "Be quiet. I think someone's coming." "It might be Papa." Lily felt a rush of hope and made to run towards the noise, but Robert grabbed her arm and held it tight. "It might not be," he said. "He's right," Malcolm growled. "The footsteps are not John's. They're too heavy." They ducked behind the broken ribs of Dragonfly's hull and waited. On the far side of the clearing they heard a clang, and another, followed by a ripping noise. Someone was rummaging through the rest of the wreckage. Lily peered around a burned-out section of fuselage. Half hidden behind the broken shape of a hydraulic pump, a figure in an aviator helmet examined a littering of flywheels and exhaust rods. Its stout body, wrapped in a bulky leather flying jacket, resembled a half-filled flour sack, Lily thought. "Who is that?" she whispered. The figure stopped and scratched its forehead with one fingerless gloved hand, muttering to itself. Malcolm peered at it. "I've no idea," he said, "but they're taking parts from Dragonfly." There was a loud screech of metal as the figure wrenched an exhaust pipe from a row of clips. It turned and threw the piece with a clatter onto a pile of scrap, then wiped its hands on the front of the leather jacket, and in one deft movement pulled a gun from a holster strapped to its back. "I know you're over there," the figure said, stepping between the broken bits of the stern. "I can hear you, and whoever you are, know this. There may only be one of me, and perhaps you think the three of you could take me in easier fight. But I've got a pistol full of big exploding mechanical piercing bullets. So why don't you just come out and we can talk about splitting this salvage 50-50 or 60-40 since, by salvager's law, I was here first. Then we can all be on our way." Lily and Robert shuffled out from behind the fuselage with their hands in the air. Malkin slunk sheepishly behind them, head bowed. When the figure pushed the scarf and goggles from its face, Robert saw it was a woman. Her cheeks were round and ruddy from the cold. Her blue eyes looked them up and down, pausing on the tube in Lily's hand. "A recording cylinder," she said. "Now that is an interesting find." Lily didn't reply, just pulled her jacket tighter around her. "Lost your tongue, have you, young man?" the woman asked. Robert shifted the bundle to hide it behind his back. "And what have you got there?" the woman asked him. "Nothing," he said. "It doesn't look like nothing to me." The woman pointed the gun at him. "Looks like you two boys have found the catch of the day. Now hand it over." "No," Lily blurted out. She stepped forward. "We're not going to give you the cylinder, or this box, or anything else. Not after what we've been through. If you want them so badly, you're going to have to take them from us." The woman laughed. "Ha ha ha, I see. It's like that." She holstered her weapon. "I think you better both come with me. Maybe I can help you." The three of them marched through a nearby field. The woman, walking a few steps behind, carried an armful of various mangled engine parts. Robert clutched the bundle containing the box against his chest. "Do you think we can trust her?" Lily shrugged. "What choice have we got?" "Let's keep on our guard," Malkin advised. The woman ushered them downhill and into a small clearing behind a line of frosty trees. A bulging patchwork balloon, tethered to the ground by an iron anchor, bobbed jauntily in the breeze. Rigged to the hull of its weathered wooden gondola were scraps of rusted wreckage, pots, pans, buckets, boxes, baskets and bundles of wood that clanged and clattered together in a syncopated rhythm like a motley wind chime. One word was stencilled on the airship's prow in white paint. Ladybird. "What is all this stuff?" Lily asked. "Scrap," the woman said. She deposited her cleanings in the various boxes and bags scattered around the snowy clearing and tended to a blackened cauldron that hung on a trivet over a smoking campfire. As she lifted the lid on the cauldron, the hearty smell of stew wafted out, making Robert's mouth water. "Can we have some food?" he begged. "We're starving." "You look at it," the woman said. "Go on then, fill yourselves up." She doled out 2 bowls full for them and scooped a mugful out of the cauldron for herself. Then she handed them each a spoon. "Lunch is served." After a night and a morning of walking on an empty stomach, it was a pleasure for Robert and Lily to have hot food and bread to soak in it. They set to eating as quickly as they could. The stew tasted spicy and delicious, and the warmth of it suffused their bellies. "What are your names, boys?" the woman asked. "I'm Robert, and this is Lenny," Lily said, interrupting. "We're Robert and Lenny." "I'm Anna Quinn, scrapper and aeronaut." After they finished eating and cleaned their plates with the crusts of bread, Anna offered them a second plateful. She even had some scraps for Malkin, but he turned his nose up at them and lay with his head on his paws, facing in the other direction. "He's not hungry?" Anna asked, tipping her head to the fox. "He doesn't eat," Lily explained. "He's a mechanimal." "Really?" Her eyes widened. "I've never seen one that looks so lifelike before, or acts it. How do you get hold of him?" "My da repairs clocks," Robert spoke with his mouth full. "He's a horologist. The fox was left with us when his owner never came to pick him up." Lily gave him a smile for such a quick-thinking lie. "Does he speak too?" Anna wondered. Malkin's ears pricked up. "Only when spoken to," he muttered, glancing at her over his knitted shoulders. And by the way, it's very clanking rude to discuss a person as if they're not there. Anna guffawed and slapped her knees with a hand. Blimey, he does. Has he got a moniker? Lily looked up, spoon halfway to her mouth. A what? A handle, a denomination, an appellation, a name. His name's Malkin, Robert explained. And what were the three of you doing at that crash site? Oh, nothing. Just scavenging like yourself. Somehow I doubt that, Anna said. She leaned forward in her seat. Let me tell you who I think you are. You're Lily Hartman, and this mechanical belongs to your father, Professor John Hartman, whose airship, Dragonfly, crashed here. Lily felt her eyes widened with shock. How do you know all that? Who are you really? The woman smiled. I told you my name's Anna Quinn. I'm a scrapper of metal, and sometimes I do a bit of investigating and writing on the side. You're the reporter who wrote the newspaper article about Papa, Lily said. That's right. I've been looking into his disappearance for a couple of days. The whole thing seemed fishy to me. The scant coverage in the other papers, the lack of a proper police investigation. So I thought I would come up here and find out more and do a bit of salvage work while I was about it. But why didn't you just contact me? Lily asked. Oh, I tried to, but I don't think your guardian passed on my telegram. It's lucky we found each other, though. Lucky how? Robert asked. As I said, I can help you. Anna poked at the fire with the tip of her boot. And then you can both do an interview for me, an exclusive. We don't know any more about this business than you do. The people chasing us, they... Anna grasped his arm. You're being chased? This does put an exciting new spin on things. Tell me more about that. Papa told me not to talk to strangers about myself. Lily clasped the cylinder to her chest. Look, we need to find out what's on this. Do you know how we can play it back? Anna held out a palm. After a moment's consideration, Lily passed her the cylinder. The woman turned it over, examining the dents and grooves on its surface. You need to plug it into the workings of another airship, she said. That's the only way you'll get anything out of it. She stood and kicked over the traces of the fire. Help me pack all of this away, she said, handing the cylinder back to Lily. Then we can go up into my airship Ladybird and take a listen. Halfway up the chain ladder that dangled from Ladybird's gondola, Robert felt queasy. This was the highest he'd ever climbed. They were higher now than when they'd stood on the roof of his house. Above him, Lily had the cylinder tucked into her coat pocket. Malcolm was curled up and buttoned inside her jacket, and she was following Anna, who nearly reached the top of the ladder. Robert slowed behind her and tried not to look down at the chains, twisting and creaking in the wind. The box, in its bundle strapped across his back, suddenly felt very heavy. He glanced up at the swaying ship, still 30 feet in the air above his head. It's too far, he muttered. I can't. Lily looked between her feet at him. Please, Robert, you've got to try. He gritted his teeth. At least if he fell, the last of the snow might cushion his fall. No, he mustn't think about falling. When he used to go walking in the woods with his dar and climb trees, it wasn't the up that scared him, but the down. That dreadful drop you had to navigate to get back on solid ground. When his vertigo got the better of him and he got stuck, Thaddeus would clamber up and help him descend. His dar had a lesson prepared for such moments, as he always did. It was similar to the thing he'd said the other day. What was it again? No one conquers fear easily, Robert. It takes practice to reach true heights, a brave heart to win great battles. Robert repeated those words to himself as he climbed higher, higher than ever before, towards the gondola of the floating airship. They gave him comfort, and soon he found he'd reached the top of the ladder. How do we get across? Lily shouted through the wind. Just do as I do. Anna opened a door in Ladybird's hull and, grabbing a metal handrail, pulled herself inside. Climbing to her feet, she stood on the deck. Simple. Lily copied her movements, clambering through the doorway, and Robert, following behind her, shut his eyes tight, thinking once more of his dar's advice. When he blinked, he was on board the airship, and Anna was winching the chain ladder onto a roll. Welcome to Ladybird, she said, as she rattled in the last few metal rungs and reached out to close the door. It's a bit of a manoeuvre to get on board, but in every other respect I think you'll find her a far first-class dirigible, if rather on the smug side. Snugside. Lily unbuttoned her jacket, and Malkin hopped out and skittered about giddily on the curved floor. "I hate these scruffy DIY airships," he complained. "It's not so bad," Lily found herself saying. Robert leaned dizzily against the wall. He was glad to have something solid under his feet. The tiny plank-walled passageway they stood in was barely wide enough for the four of them to fit into. He glanced around. A big brass porthole behind them lensed a circle of light onto four mismatched curtains, shielding the space opposite, each one hand stitched and higgledy-piggledy. "Let me give you the grand tour." Anna pulled back the rear curtain, and Robert and Lily peered in at a small tail compartment filled with an engine. Sandwiched between this tail space and the front compartment, which Robert assumed was the bridge, were two small crawl spaces, one on top of the other. The bottom one was a footlocker storage cupboard, stacked with a few empty wooden crates, and the compartment above turned out to be Anna's berth. A small mattress entirely filled the floor space. Above the mattress, a smaller brass porthole lit a few trinkets on a wonky shelf, an airship in a bottle, a portable typewriter, and a large pile of dog-eared penny dreadful adventure magazines. Lily reached in and picked up one, examining the cover of The Zepp Pirates versus the Kraken, it was called, and the engraved picture on the front was a zeppelin being attacked by an enormous sea monster who did look uncannily like her old teacher. "This is one I haven't read," she said. "I'm not surprised," Anna told her. "That's the first issue. I only just finished writing it." "You write these?" Robert asked. "Don't say it with such disdain, boy. It's another of my sidelines. I've got to make a living somehow." "They're brilliant, Robert," Lily told him. "You should read them sometime." "I don't know about that," Robert said. "After all that's happened the last few days, I'm not sure I need more drama in my life." "Of course," Lily said. She understood. For a moment, she'd forgotten about the box and the men chasing them. She glanced down at the cylinder, tucked into the pocket of her coat. Perhaps we should listen to this recording now. Anna nodded and yanked back the largest curtain and motioned them into the room at the fore of the ship. "Through here's the flight deck." The space was so small that if Robert or Lily had raised their arms, they could have touched both walls with the tips of their fingers, but crossways there was enough room for the three of them to stand shoulder to shoulder. Anna flicked a row of switches on the dashboard and needles on various gauges, and instruments came to life. Among them, Robert recognised barometers, thermometers, a compass, and a chronometer clock in a mounting. At the far end of the control panel was a cradle with an adjustable arm on a needle. "This machine will play the sound on your cylinder," Anna said, and she plugged the cylinder into the cradle and put the needle down across the groove along the end. Then she pressed the button on the dash, and the cylinder began to whirl in its mounting. There was a crackling, like someone scrunching up paper, from a speaker embedded in the wall, and Robert and Lily held their breath. Chapter 16. The recording was blurry at first, but soon words could be heard, a sharp, skewering voice barely audible over a soft silver thrum. "Professor Hartman," the voice said, "are you conscious?" "That's mould," Robert whispered, but Lily shushed him. "Starting to come around, are we?" said another voice, which sounded distinctly like Roach. "I suppose that means we're ready to begin." Lily's papa spoke then. "My name's Grantham," he stuttered. "Grantham, not Hartman. You've got the wrong person. How did you get on board?" "Grantham. G. Hartman. Grace Hartman," Roach said. "It's not the best of anagram aliases, considering we're the only ones who killed your wife in the first place." "When we'd worked out your false identity, it wasn't hard to discover the real registration papers for your mechanicals and then get your address. It's been several years, Professor. You have been rather a slippery fish to get hold of, but we have you in our sights now, so to speak." There was a distinct tapping, then that Lily knew with certainty was Roach hitting one of his mirrored eyes with a finger. A shudder ran through her as his broken face surfaced in her memory like a corpse floating from the depths of a glinting pod. I warn you, Papa was saying. His voice sounded assertive, but Lily could tell he was frightened. Boarding another airship without permission is illegal. Roach spoke again. And what you did was illegal too, sir. Very illegal. What on earth are you talking about? The theft of our master's perpetual motion machine, Professor Hartman. Where is it? There was a crackle on the cylinder. I can't, Papa said. It's hidden. Come, come. No games. Another crackle and then a scream. Lily cringed. There was a pause, filled with ragged breath. I will tell you nothing, Papa cried. You may do as you see fit. Mr. Roach chuckled, and the laugh rippled through Lily, as if the vile man stood right beside her. Well, isn't this a pleasant surprise? His voice oozed. I'd quite hoped our conversation might take this turn. I was authorised to offer money, but I see now such action would be fruitless. You're an ethical man, sir. Far too ethical for me, but perhaps you will respond better to this. Another scream and a horrible, intense whining filled the recording, and then the needle reached the end of the cylinder with a clunk click. It raised up, and the sound stopped. Lily slumped against the wall. Suddenly the wave of emotion she'd been holding in for so long rushed over her. It was as if the last glimmer of hope she possessed had just been pulled from her chest. She gazed out of Ladybird's slanted window, over a snub-nosed prow. In the distance she could see Dragonfly's parts messily strewn across the glade. She knew now for certain it was Roach and Mould who'd caused that destruction. They'd tortured her papa and taken everything. Mamma's life, Robert's Dar too, Mrs. Rust, the other mechanicals, her home. And all for this box, this perpetual motion machine. They'd done so much damage to possess it. They'd kill her and Robert too if they had the chance, and nothing she could say or do, no help she could call on, would ever stop them. Papa's dead, she said suddenly. This whole time I hoped he might be alive, might still come back, but he's not going to, is he? We should just give them the box, the machine, before they kill us too. Robert took a deep breath, his mouth dry. If we give in now, then everyone who's tried to protect it would have died in vain, and will never discover its secret, the truth of what it can do. He's right, Lily. Malkin narrowed his black eyes. There could be dangerous things inside, and Clank knows what chaos Roach and Mould could cause with them. I realise the odds don't look good, Robert added. They know everything about us, and we don't have a clue about them, so how can we ever win? But we have to win, Lil. We have to, because of them. I've got no one. They're evil, but we can't give up. We've got the one thing they want, the one thing that'll draw them to us. We can make them suffer. We mustn't let them get away with what they did, and we must never give in, not ever. Malkin nodded in agreement. This box is the only thing we have against them, the only clue left. When we get to London, we'll ask your godfather to alert the proper police, then use the promise of the perpetual motion machine to draw Roach and Mould into some kind of trap. What do you know, Malkin? Lily yelled. You didn't know anything before we read Papa's letter. She kicked at the box, bundled in its blanket. If only we had the key. Malkin said nothing, just narrowed his eyes and tipped back his ears, staring at her with that foxy superiority of his. If you're going to London, Anna said, I can take you. I have to go back anyway. File my copy and check in with my editor at the Daily Cog. I could play him this recording and see if we can help you find out anything more about this Roach and Mould or the perpetual motion machine. There must be information about it somewhere, don't you think? Lily didn't answer. She felt as if they were all drifting far away from her, and at any moment she might fall into a comatose state. She could hear Robert speaking a long way off. Thank you, Anna. A ride to London and anything else you could do would be greatly appreciated. Let's put her to bed for a while in my berth, young man. Robbie, was it? Lily let them carry her into the passageway. Anna drew back the curtain of the narrow berth, and she and Robert laid Lily carefully on the bed. Then Anna tucked a blanket round her, and she drew the curtain, before Lily heard her and Robert step away. Come on, Robbie, the aeronaut said. I have a few more questions and a job for you in the engine room. Lily woke some time later with the odd sensation of moving sideways. The wooden wall of the berth juddered with the thrum of the engine. Outside, the sky had darkened, and the brass porthole framed a few stars. She felt around for Malkin, but he wasn't there, and when she sat up, she hit her head on the shelf above the bed. The pile of penny dreadfuls and the airship in its bottle slid from the shelf and landed on the mattress around her, and the typewriter rocked on its nail. Cursing softly, she pulled back the curtain and jumped down from the berth. Except for the soft chug of a motor, Ladybird's passage was quiet. The cabin rocked back and forth under her feet, buffeted by the light winds. Lily wandered towards the sound of the engine, rubbing the bump on her head. She found Robert wedged in the stern of the ship. Standing beside the hissing furnace which connected to a greasy propeller shaft, he was frying eggs in a pan on the furnace top. Malkin lay curled up at his feet, and something about the two of them together reminded Lily of her papa. "Hello, sleepyhead. Feeling better?" Robert asked. The eggs spattered and hissed in a pan in the belly of the open furnace, and toast browned on a fork. "Look at you," Lily said. "You're a proper little cabin boy, and no mistake. Anna's let me take charge of the cooking and the engines." Robert opened another door on the front of the furnace with a stick of wood. Then he threw in a shovelful of coal. "Keeps me busy, stops me thinking too much. You know, about Dar." Lily glanced away and pretended to examine the engine. 8 spidery piston legs emerged from the rear of the furnace and turned the prop shaft and various other mechanisms that were crammed into Ladybird's tapered wooden tail. "This is an amazing device." "Isn't it?" Robert wiped his brow with a sleeve. "Anna built it herself. I've been shoveling coal into it for the last few hours. I told her everything while you were asleep, about what's happened to us. I mean, the things she didn't know. She knew a lot of it anyway, and she promised to help us." He flipped the eggs in the pan to cook the runny yolks, then slipped one egg onto each slice of toast. "She even gave me this grub from her belly box." "Her what?" Robert made a face. "It's what she calls that small box where she keeps the food, in the footlocker under her berth." "Oh," Lily laughed. "She's an odd one, isn't she? But nice. I think we can trust her." Robert handed Lily a slice of eggy bread, and she bit into it ravenously, savouring the warm, soft taste. When they'd both finished eating, he closed the furnace door and walked with her and Malkin along the passage to the flight deck. "Ah, she's awake." Anna was standing at the helm, steering. She consulted a chronometer on the dash. "You've both had a spot of midnight breakfast, I hope?" Lily nodded. "It was a feast." "Jolly good, jolly good." "Have we made much progress?" Robert asked, brushing away a yolky mark he'd made on his jacket. "See for yourself." Anna pointed at a map of Great Britain pinned to the back wall of the cabin. "We've passed 3 push pins, that long piece of thread, and the marmalade stain over the Midlands." "How long will it take us to get to London, do you think?" Lily asked. She watched Malkin sniffing away at the 4 corners of the cabin. "We're doing better than I thought." Anna lined up the sextant. "See, the dot there? Means we're not far off. If this tailwind keeps up, we should make it by first light. In a few hours we might get a glimpse of street lamps on the horizon. Hundreds there are, like the stars, and when it's dawn you see them disappear as the lamplighters go round and snuff 'em out." "Where are we going to land?" Robert wondered. Anna consulted the compass. "Depends. Gypsy balloons like Ladybird aren't welcome in a lot of places, and I haven't paid my air dues. But there's Atchings out east we can make for." "Atchings?" Lily tried out the strange word. "That's traveller polari, traveller speak, for a place to weigh anchor." Anna turned the ship's wheel, and the thick ropes that looped through the metal eyelets on the wall shifted. "What are those for?" Lily asked. "They run along the insides of the balloon to connect the steering column to the port, starboard, and tail rudders," Anna explained. "One of them breaks, and the entire airship goes off course. Could hit anything." "Strange they're not outside the gondola," Lily mused. "Not so strange," Anna said. "Your delicate parts are all inside you. If not, it would get hurt a darn sight more when you got hit." Robert was examining some of the controls on the dash. "They're also on the inside so they don't freeze and break at high altitude," he explained. Anna lit up. "He knows!" "Oh, I see," Lily said. She examined an odd-looking rifle-like gun in a mount on the wall beside the flight controls. And what's this? Anna slapped her fingers away. Don't touch that! It's dangerous. It's an emergency harpoon in case of sky pirates. But where's the harpoon? I don't have one. There was an emergency. Anna blinked sleepily. With sky pirates. Tell you what, Robbie. Why don't you take the wheel? I think I'll go grab 40 winks. You can steer for a while. You'll be good for an hour or two at least, both of you. You can keep each other awake. We'll manage, Robert said. Reckon you would. Anna pointed out a group of stars through the cabin window. Those constellations are going to move across the sky, but keep the middle star centre of the glass and the compass needle on the S of south, and you'll be heading in the right direction. Wake me when you see those street lamps on the horizon. With that, she left, and they heard her climbing into the berth behind. Soon there was the sharp tap of typewriter keys, but that drifted off into silence after a while, and Lily assumed the aeronaut had fallen asleep. Robert furrowed his brow and turned the wheel, keeping Ladybird on a straight bearing, pushing her onwards. The gentle thrumming of the engine filtered through the walls, and the heat from the pipes made the cabin pleasantly toasty. Malcolm had stretched out in a corner, his body against a warm pipe, and fallen asleep. Lily gazed out at the stars, hung about the night sky like freckles. In the distance, a tiny speck of light slipped across the firmament. Do you think that one's a shooting star? She asked. Robert studied. I'm not sure. I reckon it's moving too slow. A comet, then. Comets only appear once a century. We'd be lucky to see one in our lifetime. It's probably just another ship moving along the airways. How do you know so much about airships and astronomy, Robert? My Da knew a fair bit about both, from the chronometers he fixed, and from books. I'm so very sorry about your Da. Really I am. I never thought such terrible things would happen to him because of me. Let's not talk about it. I don't think I can bear to.